So who should you promote into a leadership position? Is it on you if people are quitting your organization as a leader? And lastly, is it okay for you to stop developing after you've garnered a leadership role? We're going to be discussing this and so much more on this episode on All Things LOCS. Antonio Garcia here. Welcome to All Things LOCS, the podcast where we are going over leadership, operation, culture, and strategy. And today I have our partner, Dr. Dan Neissany. And today we're going to be talking about leadership, aren't we?
Yes, one of my favorite topics for sure.
How so? Tell us a little bit about leadership and what it means to you and why is it your favorite topic?
I mean, how much better would everything in the world be if we just had better leaders, right? This is not a healthcare topic per se, although we're going to spend enough time on that. But really, when you look at just day-to-day, family life, friendships, whatever it is, it all revolves around who's a good leader and who's not, who's stepping up and who's not. And that's one thing that I've looked at over the last few years is just how to develop it, and more so why it's so important not just to focus on who's the leader as opposed to just developing leaders, plural.
Right. And so you said a second ago, good leaders, bad leaders. Let's start with what's a bad leader from the perspective of Dr. Dan. What's a bad leader? Where you look at this person, you're like, okay, this guy.
Honestly, it's very simplistic for me. I just look at it as somebody who is more about themselves.
Very selfish
about
themselves.
Other people. Yeah, it's just somebody who's focused on them, focused on their own ego, getting all the credit, deflecting all the blame. At the end of it, it's about me and it's not about anybody else. That is really the hallmark of what I would classify as poor leadership, for sure.
So a narcissist for the most part. So as narcissistic a little bit?
Not even that. I mean, I guess I'm taking this from personal experience because I do classify myself as a terrible leader when I was younger. And I wouldn't say I was a narcissist. It was just very micromanaging, and it was very much kind of do it my way or there's the door kind of mentality. So it's not always a matter of, I didn't have a lot of ego per se, but it was just my style was not good. I think you would really look at it and say it's a little bit more on the toxic side of it.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's tough because it's not natural for so many people. And I was definitely in that category. But yeah, for most people, we don't have natural leadership skills. It's hard. And unfortunately, to your point, whether you're narcissistic or it's just ego, it could be very detrimental for yourself and definitely for the rest of the team.
I actually have this quote here that's so funny that you're kind of talking about that. So it's from John C. Maxwell, and it says that people may hear your words, but they feel your attitude. And you would say that maybe in the past that your attitude was my way or the highway. I don't want to understand. You're doing it this way. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. And let's go, despite what someone might be feeling or thinking.
Yeah, it's tough. Like you can make some very innocent mistakes where you have a good proven track record, and it does get to a point where you get maybe a little full of yourself where it's, all right, I'm doing things at a high level. I'm putting the work in. I can see the results. So why doesn't everybody just do what I tell them to do?
Yeah.
Like an idiot. But you're going off of what you know, which is my results versus yours. I have more, so I'm going to be kind of in charge, and you just got to follow me. But that's clearly, to your point, the people follow, what they say, but they want to see you put the work in, and they want to see where your actions.
Yeah.
Your actions are really everything. So,
being in the trenches with you.
Yeah. So it's one thing to say, hey, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, but then your actions are the opposite. They're going to go with what you do versus what you say.
100%. So you kind of talked a little bit about like what's a bad leader. And it sounds like they're a little bit selfish. It's themselves first. It's, maybe they did some things that yielded some results. And now it's like, I don't listen to anybody. I don't need to understand. I just need to kind of continue to march and continue this path of just my thinking. At what point does people transition into being a good leader? And how does that look like in being a good leader?
Honestly, the first step that everybody has to do when you're trying to just develop the skills, right? So for some of you, if it's I'm in a management position, maybe some of you are not in a management position, but maybe you're a parent or an older sibling, whatever it may be. To really make any effective change, you have to start with actually doing some real deep self-reflection and actually start analyzing yourself to see how things are trending. And we all have a vision of who we want to be within either a company or just within our life. And it's really very infrequent that people actually stop and look at themselves and say, all right, where am I compared to where I want to be? Mm-hmm. And I know for me, that was what I did is I didn't see the results I was looking for, but it really was necessary for me to sit down and just analyze my own performance, as well as just the performance of the team. I think that's really the best hallmark is, all right, how's everybody else doing? You know, it's like if a coach is great and his team is terrible, coach doesn't look so great.
Right.
You know, if you're in sports and they're committing fouls and turnovers and they're sloppy, it's a reflection on leadership. So it's kind of hard to say I'm doing a great job, but everybody else is crap.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way to look at it. It's everybody else's fault, not mine. You can only do that for so long before it's like, all right, everybody else is struggling. Maybe that's an issue with the person who's at the top of the chain. So you got to start with yourself first.
100%. And I would say that, I don't know if you'd say, like, it kind of boils down to those two things. Using that football analogy, like there's that eye test of like, I'm seeing them drop balls, I'm seeing them miss routes,
Yep.
I'm seeing them miscommunicating, and that leads to losses, to defeats. And so there's the observable stuff, and then there's also key metrics that are in a business that it feels like only a small majority of businesses actually measure employee happiness. Culture, things like that. And that I would categorize that under the leadership anchor. Tell me a little bit about kind of what businesses can do to make sure that they're monitoring and looking at the metrics of the, I guess, mental health or the burnout of their people, of their employees.
So, no, and those are all really good points. I wouldn't say it's as much about happiness because that's very person dependent, but fulfillment is probably a better way to put it. You know, do your employees feel fulfilled?
What's the difference between like if someone is like they're very, very happy at their job versus they're very fulfilled at their job?
So you can be, and it can be definitely both, right? It's not one or the other. Somebody can be fulfilled in the sense of that relates more so to their mission. Like, that's deeper and really more important because that actually is speaking directly to the company's mission and their why and their values and standards. And an employee could definitely be happy, you know, if they're working part-time, they got a nice flexible schedule, they're making good money. That's going to be, they'll feel very happy in that moment because they have a good balance of life for them at least. But that doesn't mean they're necessarily fulfilled. They can still hate potentially going to work, or they can still hate what the company does, or maybe they don't hate it. It's just not speaking to them. So when you look at a company's own mission and their why, it's really important when you look at fulfillment, does that speak to the employee? You know, because at the end of the day, when we're talking about measuring leadership, you're really looking at some very basic metrics that a lot of companies don't track. Turnover rate, so how many employees are quitting? Is it more than what's normal? What's more than what's average? Employee productivity, which is related to their motivation and their overall level of engagement, and even measuring employee engagement. Do you have employees who have one foot out the door, people who are actively seeking another job?
Or are they all in?
Yeah, you have like, you know, and you're never going to have obviously every single employee that's fully engaged. It's never 100%, but are you at what the best companies are at? Are you at 70% where 70% of your employees, they're coming in and they're working for the company and they're working for the product or patients or or customers, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So those are the really important metrics to look at because that actually is directly related to what's the leadership team doing. And if you see those numbers are terrible, and that's some of the stuff I would look at back in the day even for myself was really turnover rate. You see a lot of people leaving and you don't think they should be.
Right.
Yeah, it's especially if you're, again, somebody like myself, when I'm like, I'm a great leader, then why are people leaving?
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of people don't ask. It's just, unfortunately, the easy excuse nowadays is, well, people don't want to work. And that's just bullshit. People do want to work. They just don't want to work for you.
There's that, exactly. There's that saying that people don't quit their jobs, they quit their managers.
Yeah, 100%.
So when you've scaled a lot of healthcare practices, and for you, when you walk in and you're consulting, you're working with the doctors, you're checking out the team and what's going on and trying to figure out what their LOCS is, like what's their operations, what's their culture, what's their strategy. And then, but it always starts with like, what's the leadership looking like first? When you first go in there and you're kind of, overturning some of these stones, you're kind of looking behind the walls, you're kind of peeling back the curtain here a bit. What are some things that you look for with leadership to determine whether, like, what strategies need to be applied for them to increase their leadership? The biggest, if not the biggest, one of the biggest things I look at is overall communication. You know, do you walk into an organization and hear nothing? Meaning there's no chatter, there's no talking, so the communication is non-existent. Are they collaborating?
You know, and that tells me a few things. It's going to make it very hard to be innovative. And more so because it tells me that there's not a lot of trust. People don't feel comfortable speaking up. And the teamwork is terrible, which means you have people doing things all on their own and not using the best resource. And the best resource isn't a piece of equipment. It's the people that you work with usually. So it's, can I leverage your skills and talents to help the organization thrive? If you're working with patients, can I leverage somebody else's knowledge or opinion to help out on a case or whatever it may be? So that's really the thing I look for the most, is how well is the team working together and communicating at a high level. And if they're not, that tells me a lot. A lot of not good things. It's really, it does speak heavily to culture, but the culture obviously starts with the leader. So let me ask you a question now. When we're outside of looking at, for me, it's communication. I think the question that I would also ask, because I see a lot of this, and I know my opinion, but I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. Leadership styles, right?
Yeah.
Where I don't know, especially for those of you that maybe are cruising LinkedIn, you see so many posts and just commentary on what kind of leadership style do you invoke. And I know how I feel about it, which we can certainly touch on. But I'm just curious to know, when you're working with somebody in a leadership position, maybe it's even just company owner, what are your thoughts on it, and just how do you kind of navigate that aspect?
Well, I think kind of the biggest thing, the most important thing is kind of figure out how authentic the leader is, how authentic the CEO is. Oftentimes we start to see, especially as a consultant when we're coming in, just to kind of give some maybe context to this, for me going into an organization, work with an organization, like I have to do two things simultaneously and have to demonstrate this at a high level. One is being a follower really, really quick, that I'm still edifying the owner, I'm still edifying the team, I'm still making them feel like $1 million, and that I'm not some kind of bull in the china shop just trying to stir things up. Like I can't do that because there's no buy-in. But then also, I'm also brought in to solve a lot of problems. I'm helping out the CEOs, the CTOs, the CMOs, you name it. And so when I go in, I need to really look at how authentic is the team. And you could tell right off the bat if someone, as you said, like, are they all in? Are they being authentic? Are they being real? Are they being really genuine in their responses on what's going on with the business in terms of what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses? And it's something that I think it's important that people appreciate, that it's also a gut feeling. You're talking to someone and you're like, this dude's lying right now. He's so full of it. Like he can't even walk straight. And someone else where maybe they're not getting the words out, but you can tell that they're being real. So I need to determine quickly if someone is being authentic or if they're being disingenuous right off the bat. And especially on what subjects. If we're talking about finance and there's this guard that comes up with everybody, we're like, okay, that's a tell. It's like in poker. We live here in Vegas, right? When someone gives you a tell, you're like, okay, something's off on this one. And it's like, cool, noted for later. And then if we're getting into operations, for example, or we're getting into maybe flow charts, their organizational chart, whatever it is that when you start peeling back, I want to see what their reactions are. And based off of that, you can reverse engineer what's going on with the leader and also in what departments. So when you have a one-on-one with them, we start figuring out why this is happening. And it can boil down into like a leadership style, that maybe the way that they are, whether they're a bull or they're highly analytical or they're maybe a little passive aggressive, some departments as a whole actually behave a little bit different. If you're a bull, that might work well with your sales department. That might work well if you have a boiler room. But doing that with like your accounting team, maybe not. Maybe you have to take a slightly different approach or adjust. So I want to look at if they're being authentic or inauthentic on what things that we talk about, and then reverse engineer how they're actually kind of acting, and ask them questions. How do you address this problem? What's your meeting cadence like? How do you run your one-on-ones? So on and so forth. And then from there, most people could tell like, okay, you're trying to be something that you're not. And people are picking up on that. And you're getting poor production in key areas because you're actually not completely comfortable with who you are. And that's the mistake. So just to kind of add a little bit further on that is, I think the best place to start is making sure that people understand, that these business owners understand that you're perfect the way you are, in the sense that you don't need to be anything that you're not. I use, like, are you familiar with like personality styles? Like we use that a lot, right? So whether you're using predictive index or DISC or if you're a red color personality or a yellow or a green or a blue, or are you a tiger or are you a dolphin? There's so much data out there that says exactly the same thing. Doesn't really matter. Those quadrants are the same. But that it doesn't make sense for Magic Johnson to lead in the way of Kobe Bryant, and it doesn't make sense for Kobe Bryant to lead in the way of Tim Duncan. They're all very different, but each one of them have 5 championship rings. Each one of them are finals MVPs. Each one of them are in the Hall of Fame. They just led differently to themselves. And I think that's the most important thing, is to strip away the idea of what you need to be and embrace what you actually are and elevate that. And I think you're going to have way better leadership.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. And I really like what you said too about knowing how to act in almost certain situations based on who you're talking to. Like
Versatility.
You gave the example of the sales team versus the accounting team.
Yeah.
You know, and that's
so different, right?
Yeah, just a little bit different personalities.
Slightly different. Yeah.
But that's where I feel like people, they kind of like slip a little bit in the sense of, I have to be all of these different styles all at once.
Big mistake.
Versus, all right, how do I need to act maybe for this group of people or in this situation? And almost knowing, like, even for those athletes, it's like, all right, they know when they need to maybe act a little bit differently than what their normal style may be. Like, even for the guy who's quiet, he's going to know, all right, does this call for an authoritative style right now versus an analytical style? And so there is that too, because I think to your point about being authentic, and that's really glad you brought that up, because that's something that I was going to ask you too, of like, do you notice, because I feel like for me, I've seen this, but I'm curious to know what you've seen on your end of people who get promoted to a leadership position and then they start acting differently.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, like, what your experience with that is, and if you've seen that, like, why do you think that occurs, and how does that actually play into that aspect of just being yourself and being authentic? Yeah.
So that typically happens with people that they're getting promoted for the first time. If this is, so we see this in like Fortune 100 companies, where in some businesses, in some industries, it's musical chairs. Mm-hmm. You see this in banking, right? A lot of the top people, they're constantly moving. You see this in real estate. A lot of top people constantly move. Head coaches, they're constantly moving for sports franchises. This typically happens for people when it's their first time, that they're promoted to, like, all right, you're going to be a sales manager. And it's like, oh, you got to be, it's like, no, dude. For someone that this is not their first rodeo, they know that they just need to continue to do the things that got them there in the first place and actually be far more empathetic and really increase their communication and their versatility. So kind of going back to that first point is that the more versatile someone is, being able to connect with a different variety of people in a variety of different ways, in a variety of different situations, they're always going to win. So if you look at quarterbacks, some of the best quarterbacks ever, you could throw any defense at them, they're going to splice that thing up and get touchdowns. It doesn't matter what you throw at them because they're versatile to the defense. Same thing with like basketball players. It doesn't matter. They're going to give you the business. No, they're going to get their buckets. Doesn't matter what you throw at them. In business, it's kind of the same way too, is that no matter what you throw at me, whether I am resolving a problem in my HR department, in my legal department, my marketing department, accounting, sales, that I can be versatile to those people and versatile to the situation. And I feel like that is something where you have to appreciate the spectrum of people and communicate. So it's like almost like a dog trainer. Like, there's ones that are really good at working with all different types of dogs, or one is just working with German Shepherds. And I guarantee you, in a business where there's all different types of breeds in your business, that if you're just that German Shepherd trainer, you're going to fall flat with a ton of others. It's the same way. And I think where, kind of answering your question with the manager, or that they get promoted or whatever it is, that it's that inexperience where they feel like they need to be something that they're not. And oftentimes when that happens, they squeeze their spectrum of communication. It's kind of what you mentioned when that happened to you at the beginning. I'm just behaving this certain type of way and only this type of way, my way or the highway. It actually squeezes that down. When you expand on that, when you're in a leadership position, you're able to connect with more people and drive people to an objective and actually accomplish it.
Man, that was so good. And I think that's really, I hope you guys really listen to that, because it's, to your point, a lot of new people who get promoted, but when you look at who are the managers, the supervisors, the directors, a lot of them are first timers. And that's something I've seen too, where it's, okay, now I need to act differently.
Yeah.
And I've been here for
calm
maybe,
down.
I've been here for like maybe 3 or 4 years, acting a certain way, talking a certain way, and now I'm promoted. And all of a sudden they walk in day one. It's, who the hell is this person that I'm seeing and hearing? And that's something that that I've had to, talk to certain directors about. Just be the person that got you the promotion, not the person you think everybody wants you to be. If that was the case, you wouldn't be getting promoted to begin with. So I think that's really important, just to remember, how did I get here? And to just kind of follow that same pathway. And understanding that doesn't mean, as we're going through maybe some personal development, that you're not going to change, but it doesn't change you who you are at your core.
Right, 100%. What would you say are some of the characteristics, in you working with different doctors and different clinical directors, managers, things like that? When you're working with them, like what approaches do you give them to elevate their leadership, and trusting you that, like, hey, you think you're this based off of the keyhole in which you're looking at, but here with us, we're looking at your blind spots. And trusting us that, look, this is an area of your game or of your business repertoire or your business acumen that's a little shallow that we need to beef up in order for the whole thing to actually run. And this one's around leadership, which can be a little sensitive. Talk to us a little bit about how you have those conversations with those doctors.
You have to just be honest. And what I mean by that is, it's, I know some people are like, duh, but it's, it's being,
you don't say, Dan.
Right?
Okay.
But,
be honest, lie to them. Yeah.
Improving in any leadership realm. And you asked me at the beginning, it was the first step. It's about starting with yourself. So are you willing to improve yourself as a person, first and foremost? If I have somebody who doesn't take or invest in any kind of leadership development, but maybe personal development, maybe it's books, webinars, whatever, going to a Tony Robbins event, whatever it is for you. If you're not doing any of that, that definitely tells me a lot about what you want to do, because the highest level leaders, they focus on growth. And usually what I see from some people who struggle is, for them, they say, well, I've kind of reached a pinnacle, and they're like 27. I'm like, you're done growing already? Like, is that it?
Yeah.
So it's,
is that all you got, pal?
Yeah. So it's
okay,
really,
Steve. Like, sure.
Exactly. It's this aspect of having a growth mindset, which really always means for you out there is not necessarily, does that mean I've never reached the pinnacle? And in reality, no. The answer is you haven't reached the pinnacle because there is none. Because it's a focus on constantly improving yourself. Yeah. So it's being curious. It's actually wanting to improve yourself. And it's really, what I look at people, that's a big tell, is just what are they willing to do with feedback? So to your point, you're like, all right, they might listen to you, but are they really listening? Or are they just, oh, that's nice. And then inside they're disagreeing with everything you're saying. And giving some feedback and receiving feedback, the biggest key with any of that is, what do you do after the fact? Yeah. And that's one thing that it ridiculously pisses me off. People get feedback and then they do nothing with it. Yeah. It's just like, okay, thanks a lot. And it's just lip service. It'd be like me asking you, hey, tell me everything I could do better. And then you tell me, thanks, Antonio. And then I just stay the same and do nothing different. It's like, what the hell is the point of me asking you? Yeah, yeah. So are people willing to receive feedback, do something with it, take some action on getting better? And that's really the best of the best. They work on improvement nonstop. Yeah. And I think even for people like us, like with what we're doing with best practice strategies and what we do as like coaches and consultants, is that sometimes part of the job is identifying what their MVPs are. So the main vein of pain. So if you guys are watching to know what that is. So the main vein of pain, like what is the thing that is just keeping them up at night with like heartburn, staring at the ceiling? Like what's that thing that they're constantly up about that's really being a pain point in their life, and professionally and personally? So that's one, the MVP. But it can also be looked at as the main vein of pleasure. What's the thing that they want to gain at? What's the thing that they truly desire the most? And positioning that feedback. So if you're asking me like, hey, Antonio, how can I get better? There's areas of my business, there's areas of myself that feel like I'm not aware of that I want to get better. So the question would be like, why is that something that you want advice on? Like, I'm sure there's a reason you're asking me that. Can you tell me a little bit about why that came about? Because now what we want to do is do some positioning. That we want to dangle the thing that they're desiring or the pain that they're trying to avoid, and position the advice as the thing you need to do in order to achieve it. Yeah.
So if someone just comes at us kind of that way, which they totally have in 1,000 different ways, where the lazy thing to do is just give it to them. It's very lazy. And just, all right, it's this. But there's nothing there. It's like, well, all right, well, what's going on? I just found out I'm serving divorce paper. I got served divorce papers, or hey, my payroll company really screwed up here, or hey, I'm going to be losing a couple of major clients, or worse, really great employees are being poached someplace else, and I want to keep them, or I want to avoid this. So now when we dangle that as like, this is the thing that we can fix, as long as you follow this advice, then the likelihood of them doing it is significantly higher. And you're just playing the probabilities game. But that's the whole point, right? That's kind of what you said at the beginning, is taking that action, and sometimes smuggling in why you're taking that action is going to make the biggest difference in actually them doing it and not doing it.
But now, I want you to check this out, is that everything you just described, which is the common scenario of, I have some pain, and now I want to make some improvement, versus how many people just say, I want to get better because I want to get better. It's, I'm doing amazing, life's phenomenal, business is great, but I want to take that next level. And that's just something you typically don't see a whole lot of.
It's a fraction of a fraction of people that are wired that way. And I got to tell you, those people are probably the funnest people to work with. They're just like, put me in, coach. They're so coachable. They have a great attitude. They're so humble, so fucking humble, where they're just like if I say, write this every single morning, 5 times a day without fail, they're like, yes, sir. When do you want it? And they're ruthless with it, and they have a great attitude along the way. Those are the funnest people. And the cool thing about that is that you can choose to be that way. And you know what else that they have? They usually have the best results.
Yeah. That's
hands down.
Yeah. And it's really the difference between being proactive versus reactive. And that's, where I look at certain individuals who are more reactive. They'll be on fire. They say, give me some feedback. I'm going to get better. And then as soon as things kind of level out, okay, now I can drop off. Now I can stop doing, now I can go back to my old habits.
Yeah. And you've experienced this with leaders too, as well.
Yeah,
you work with, they're high, and then like, all right, I'm taking it.
They got the result, which is, hey, I'm getting divorced, or I'm stressed, or my business is struggling and I'm losing employees. And they're able to fix that. And then they say, okay, now I can kind of take the foot off the gas pedal, and I can relax like I was before, not knowing that the shit they did before is what got them in trouble to begin with. But then they go right back to it. And you see that with patients. It's maybe, you go into a physical therapy office or a chiropractor's office, and they give you some exercises for home to work on things. And the patient's like, I'm going to do this every single day. I'm going to change my diet. I'm going to change my workstation setup to be better for my back. And they do all that, and then they feel great and get discharged. And then they come back to the office 6 months later saying, my back's killing me. Yeah. And you ask them, like, so how's that exercise program going? I stopped. How's the diet? I stopped that too. Ergonomic workstation? Yeah, I went back to my old way. It's like, well, why'd you do the stuff that got you in trouble to begin with?
So I got a really good question on that. So for you, and seeing that, we're like, we would love the clients and the people to continue their path of growth, like, get your business from 2 million to 5 million, 5 million to 10 million, so on and so forth, right? As long as that's what they're looking for. And you're talking about that they're putting the pedal to the metal, they achieve it, and then they go back.
Yes.
How much of when you talk to these doctors is it important to, or these entrepreneurs, to make sure that we're just not hitting a certain target and then regressing, but making it about a lifestyle change and continuing your path?
Yeah, I mean, that's where you have to focus on just the overarching, like, not just the objective, right? Because it's very easy to be like, okay, my turnover rate is 30% and I want to get that down to 10. Okay, easy enough. But why? Like, what does that actually represent? And that's where I feel a lot of people in general, but certainly business owners, practice managers, they don't really understand the big why behind what they're actually trying to do. So it'd be the same as if somebody, hey, I'm going to start going to the gym now. Okay, why? Well, I'm obese and my blood pressure is skyrocketing, and they need to do this to get healthy. And then they get healthy, and then they stop. Right? So they're not really attaching it to anything bigger than themselves. Saying, why do you want to get in shape? Well, because I want to be able to walk my child down the aisle when she gets married. That's going to probably keep you engaged long term when you're focusing on that. Versus if you're focusing on just a short result, well, once you get the result, that's it. And that's where a lot of people, they struggle is they get their outcome, just like that person who went to therapy or a chiropractor's office, they got rid of their pain and then they go backwards. So it's really it's really being able to project long-term, like what is a real long-term goal and what does that really look like, and understanding why is that your goal. That's what actually will keep business owners engaged when they're focused on what is our big objective that we're going after, and not just setting something for 3 months.
Yeah.
All right. Because it's like, oh, I got a 3-month goal. Well, then you hit it. Then what? Now you're just left kind of twiddling your thumbs. So it's being able to get those short-term goals, maybe having you come in and helping me out with my turnover, but then understanding, all right, once we do that, what's the overarching big one that we're focusing on over the next year or 2 years or 5 years?
And that's a big one that when people choose to work with you is I would say like a cornerstone of what you would do when these companies or these practices, it doesn't really matter, that they're so locked into the trenches of what happens on a day to day. It's just like it's almost like their heads in their sand, in the sand. And to ask them like, hey, what do you want to achieve in the next 3 months? They're like, that's like an eternity down the road, man. And you're like, it's actually not. It's going to be here like in a finger snap. So how do you articulate the importance of, hey, I get it. You know, you're going through a ton of insurance denials. Your business is going through this. These are some challenges. These are other obstacles. This is what's going on with your labor, your money, blah, 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 blah. However, we need to take some time to kind of get our head out of the sand and look long term and find what that North Star is and dig our heels into that and really right the ship in that direction.
I can't do that. I'm treating patients. No, I mean, that's what typically, I'm just too busy to think about that. And it's so interesting to hear that. I'm just like, you're too busy to focus on your life, or you're too busy to focus on your business. You know, ultimately, anybody in medicine, we all have a very similar mindset in the sense of long-term ramifications and changes, right? So if we're talking to a patient, it's not just, hey, just do this now, unless it's like an antibiotic. But even then, it's let this play out for the long course versus, you know, like nobody ever took a 10-day antibiotic and said, hey, if you feel better after day 5, stop it. It's like, no. You do the whole 10 days, so it doesn't come back.
Yeah, you want that disease to come back there, Carl.
And that's exactly what we do a lot of times in business. So it's understanding what is stopping prematurely look like, but what is not executing a long-term plan actually really look like. And that's where people, they don't tend to focus long-term. And when we look at a field like healthcare, it's actually very predictable. And what I mean by that is, pretty sure anybody, whether you know anything about healthcare at all, insurance never gets any better. So if you have a practice, there's never been one year where you say, hey, we're getting paid more now by insurance companies. It's always, we got screwed again. So we know the predictability from that standpoint. And then being able to have a plan in place to overcome that. Or you can wait 4 years and say, wow, we've gone down a ton in revenue. What do we do now? Versus being proactive. So it's really, when I look at the mindset of even a business, you have to have somebody in charge there who is very focused on growth. And that's why I look at growth as not just the business growth, but you have to have a personal growth, because if you're not looking far enough ahead, and we have plenty of people just in the US and around the world who we focus just, what is today bringing? But not having any plan going forward, which is why so many people have no life savings when they retire. Same thing in business. They get to a point they say, well, what do we do now? We didn't think about this.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point. So when we're looking even at leadership, it's not just a matter of having somebody who can motivate the staff or somebody who's really good at building systems but then has no personality. It's who's really just leading us with regards to the overall growth of the company and understanding what does that actually look like, you know, with regards to being able to overcome the trends.
Right. So as we wrap this one up on LOCS, with leadership being one of the key anchors on that one, what are some of the biggest lessons that you received in your life that really drilled home to you that, like, all right, this is a leadership thing. It falls on me. I got to take complete ownership on that. What were a couple things that happened where that really hit home for you?
I think really the first one is when you talked about data and metrics, and that's when we're looking at how do you know if you have a really good leader in place? And I mentioned about communication, collaboration, but from your own personal standpoint, if you're analyzing yourself, I look at it to see what kind of influence I have over other people. And that's the thing that for me actually triggered was I'm looking around and outside of people quitting, I didn't see the growth that I thought I should see from others with the amount of time I was spending investing in them. And so it's really looking at key understanding that leaders build more leaders. So that's number one, is what does the rest of the team around you look like? And how well can you influence people to start stepping up and taking action and taking responsibility? So that was the biggest one for me. It was just nobody was developing. And so clearly whatever I was doing wasn't working.
So that's interesting. So like when you do something or when you're developing yourself, like how far is that residual effect hitting? Is it seeping through every single department, or is it just on you? And that's an indicator of how you're developing is the kind of residual effect on others.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, when you look at even some of the best leaders just in general ever, they all had a very high influenceability.
Huge.
Influenceability to do the right thing, take the right actions, and inspire people to do something greater than themselves. So that's really the first and foremost. And then other than that, it's really being able to, understand, again, most of us are lacking the skills, so you have to do the work. But then the other thing that I've gotten from a lot of people is I don't have good leaders in my life. I didn't have that strong parent. My parents divorced, they were abusive maybe. I had jobs before, and just they were all terrible examples. Those are good examples of what not to do. So for me, where I had a really great mentor, but I started noticing some things I didn't like about him. That he would, trash a team a little bit behind closed doors. And at first, I knew that wasn't who I wanted to be. But then I was like, those are good learning lessons. Those are lessons on how not to act,
right?
On how not to be. So I really find that that's an important aspect where a lot of people who don't have those prototypical examples of leadership is look at people who you think have terrible leadership skills and just do the opposite. And that actually is what you need to do to deliver at a high level.
They won't listen to me. You should be a great listener.
Yeah. Seriously. It's like so
simple. You're like, oh my God.
Do the opposite.
Yeah.
So that's where I'd say the two biggest things was what's the development of everybody around you, and looking at the ability to learn from everybody. And the people who aren't good leaders, learn from them. And then you'll start developing your skills. So that's probably the two biggest things I would say.
So what are some, so I guess I would maybe recap it maybe in this way, is that to be a great leader, you have to be a great follower. You start with that. It's like, it's the most tried and true, relationship in history is you need to do that. Yeah. And so when you think about like who's a really good follower, it's like, all right, well, they do their marching orders. They have to put their ego to the side. They have to be humble. Like mutiny or disrespect for higher command. That's out the window. You want to make sure that a really good follower has those things and that you exemplify those things. And the thing is that when you move into leadership, it's the same thing but 10x'd, is that you're still humble. You still communicate. You still don't speak ill of people. You still are very clear and precise in your communication. You're still very adaptable. And the thing is that when you're running any type of business and you're like, gosh, I feel like this thing could be further along than what it is, and you've flipped every single, you're looking at every single place to figure out what it is, whether it's operations, is it my marketing, and my sales, and ultimately you start to look within yourself. And the question is like, are there areas of my personality, are there areas of my leadership style that I'm not aware of that's holding me back and my business back? And the answer is usually yes. And I think that, again, is when you need to get an outside perspective. You need to have maybe a coach, consultant. Even if you're not in a place where you don't have the resources for that, it's kind of what you said, like, okay, like what have I learned? Where did I learn it? And what would happen if I did the opposite? If I'm used to people over talking, if I'm used to people not listening, if I did the opposite, what would be the results of that? What could be the results of that? Would it be better? It's like, is it worth a shot? Cool. Let's try it out. So I think when it comes to leadership, it's the most important thing, because now you're actually providing marching orders for the organization. And when you're getting people to be all in on the organization, on what your strategy is for your company, on what your marketing is, if we're doubling the business in size, whatever, then now you have troops and soldiers and followers in place that are all in on you because you're also all in on them. And it takes that kind of give and take. It takes that relationship. in order for companies to truly grow, and also for families, and also for like friends and nonprofit organizations. It doesn't really matter. That this is where it begins, is always looking within, being versatile, being adaptable, being very clear, being very authentic, but also humble and empathetic too. It's so hard to apply any strategy to a company and allow it to grow if that one thing is lacking. That's why it's first.
Man, whew, that was good. Honestly, I think I would finish up with this aspect, which is in terms of a healthcare focus, and we spend a lot of time talking about owners, managers, directors. Healthcare is a little bit different in the sense that you're impacting somebody else's livelihood, meaning you're taking care of somebody else's health. You're not taking care of your own, and it's the responsibility that comes with that. So for those of you that are in healthcare, even if you're not in a direct position of leadership, management, whatever, maybe you're a front desk administrator, athletic trainer, whatever it may be, what you do day to day impacts somebody else at a very high level. And that's one thing that I've really stressed with anybody that walks through the four walls of a healthcare organization and gets a job there, is that you're now responsible for somebody else, and not to take that lightly. So as we're talking about leadership skills, it's not just for the people who are at the top and setting the culture, it's for every single employee. And this is why it's important to teach every single employee what that actually looks like. All right, welcome to the follow-up, a bonus episode that is going to explain actionable items that you can apply to your healthcare practice from the episode that you just hopefully watched. And I want to jump right into it. So today we talked about leadership and the importance of leadership in a healthcare organization. But I want you to really understand this first and foremost, just some stats to kind of throw at you, which is most employees, in fact, 65 to 70% of employees quit because of management. So I want you to really think about that. What does your leadership team look like? And thinking about all the employees that have left, if 65 to 70% of them were because of management or directors, how do we have to improve that? Which then leads into some other stats that stats tell you a good picture, which is about 45% of managers feel that they don't know what the hell they're doing when they're promoted to that position. So I want you to think about that. Half of the clinical managers or directors are kind of clueless. Now, I was one of those people, so I know exactly how that feels, and it's not a good feeling, and I understand the effect that it has on your team, and we're going to dive into how that affects your team. But then the other aspect, too, is that 67% of managers actually fail within 12 to 18 months. So what are we really doing to help the people that are actually running, for the most part, healthcare practices and organizations? And when you think about people quitting because of management, how much is that costing you? And now, if you're not sure and you say, I don't really know. I mean, it's healthcare, so people just leave, whenever they want. I'm kind of used to it. You have to also factor in then what is the cost to replace employees, and how does that affect, the leadership team that you have? So when we think about the replacement cost of employee, what is the dollar amount? Aside from looking at hours spent, you have to then think you're spending about 16% of a person's salary up to 213% of a person's salary. So if you're replacing even a front desk admin, which is a little bit on the lower end of the pay scale, you're still going to have to spend about $6,000 to replace that person. Now, what if it's a doctor that's leaving? What if it's a doctor who's making maybe $500,000 a year? Now, your replacement cost of that doctor is going to be $1 million. So if you don't think leadership really has an important role to play, these are just some numbers to help you understand the true ramifications. Now, actionable items. What can we do, and how would you start today if you felt inclined to take immediate action? And first and foremost, it has to start with you. Whether you're the owner, chairperson, it doesn't matter. And when I say it doesn't matter, is that you could have a phenomenal team. Your managers could be crushing it. Your employees could be insanely motivated. They're looking to the people at the top to set the standard. So if your team is wonderful and the person at the very top is creating an environment that might be deemed toxic or just maybe not a conducive working environment, you're going to eventually lose people. It's going to wear on them. So you have to start with yourself. And it starts by having some self-reflection to realize, what am I really good at? What am I struggling at? how do my behaviors and emotions affect the rest of the team? That's a non-negotiable. Secondly is, if you're then trying to communicate how you're changing and you want to morph the environment to one that is going to promote employees to stay, you then have to start with, how do I get everybody else to start taking a leadership role as well? And that really comes into training. And how many of you actually have any kind of mentoring or coaching within your organization, whether you're a small practice or maybe a hospital? Do you provide any of that training? And if you say, well, I don't have the time, fair enough. There are programs outside of your own building that you can bring coaches in, or you can have programs that people can apply to that will help them develop these skills. Now, the other aspect too is going to be you're trying to promote a leadership environment, and that starts really with the people that you also hire. And if you're hiring these people to elevate your practice and elevate your organization, will you actually trust them to do their job? So the one thing that can completely demoralize a whole company, honestly, is micromanagement. If you think about it, who likes to have somebody looking over their shoulder all the time? So developing leadership also is about developing trust. And when you're looking to develop trust between yourself and employees, or between management and employees, you have to think about, how do I actually do that? And it comes down to just being honest with them, to being transparent, being open to telling them when you don't know exactly what you're doing, or you're not sure exactly what to do to fix a solution. The people who can check their ego and just openly communicate to their staff, those are the ones that are going to build trust. And at the end of the day, employees want to know that leadership is honest and open with them. And when you guys start being more transparent, and you can demonstrate some humility by talking to them about your own mistakes and your own errors, that is actually what starts building trust between employees and leadership. And when you can develop that trust, that's when you can stop micromanaging and actually let employees do what you hire them to do. Now, as we wrap this up, I want you to really, again, just focus on starting some self-reflection, taking some purposeful time to sit down and really scrutinize yourself. How are you helping the team get better? How are you helping them grow? And what kind of value are you bringing? Then what kind of standard are you setting for the rest of the company? And then really I want you to focus just on what kind of leadership development can I put in place? Whether it's meetings with the staff one-on-one, or whether you're doing something as a group, or you're hiring consultants, whatever it may be, start putting together a leadership development plan now. Catch you next time.